Hi everyone, welcome back to our College Ready Grammar Week 2. So last time we introduced a few very simple concepts. So today we will expand our discussion on those most basic concepts. So first, we quickly review what we did last time. We discussed that for grammar, we want to study sentences and how to build sentences. Sentences consists of parts of speech, which is just a fancy name for categories of words, English words, and there are a part of speech, and we can classify them into two groups. The first group, noun, verb, adjective, adverb. Those are most important parts of speech that contain substantive information. The other four, pronoun, conjunction, preposition, and interjection, they're kind of just functional glue words that connect more informative words like nouns, verbs, adjective, and adverb. So in that sense, they do not provide much information by themselves. We'll see how that works later when we go along. So at the very beginning, I just want to understand that not all words are the same. When we study parts of speech, we need to fundamentally understand how each part of speech functions in a given sentence. But at a high level, this information and a non-information distinction is quite helpful for you to understand those parts of speech. Okay, we talk about sentences. So what is a sentence? Well, at a high level, you really think about just two parts. One is the subject, one is the predicate. Well, we haven't used the fancy name predicate yet, but predicate is kind of just very artificial concept created by grammarians. You don't really have to worry about it. So you can roughly think a predicate, a so-called predicate, is just a verb, then plus something. Technically, other than subject, everything else is part of the so-called predicate. But at the high level, you really just want to think about predicate is a verb, then plus something. So we really focus on a subject and a predicate, which is a verb. Okay? So we quickly discuss a few very representative simple sentence patterns. In particular, we look at two types of verbs. One is linking verb, like a be verb. She's beautiful. She's a beautiful girl. Here, the verb is a so-called be verb, which is perhaps the most important and the most unusual verb in English, because we only have this very one type of verb, that is a be verb. Nothing is similar to this verb. Well, of course, the be verb will have different just forms depending on the particular subject in the sentence. It could be I am, she is, they are, and so on. And of course, those are the three, and then they have different just tense forms, like the past tense. But be verb is very unique. And we will learn later that be verb is a special so-called linking verb. Linking verbs conceptually kind of similar to be verb, but there are not many linking verbs at all in English. They are kind of special because they do not have any meaning of action. When we think about a verb, we think about the action. So most verbs, to be exact, other than linking verbs, all other verbs are action verbs. And then we see that in this diagram, we see that birds sing and she sang a sad song. Those sentences contain an action verb because singing is an action. So we saw 4 actually simple sentence patterns. But you may be curious why we call them simple sentence. Well, it's important before we go into the details. At a high level, you understand how we would classify all English sentences and how to gradually build up the framework. That's how actually you should learn how to write. You start from the simple sentences and then build more complex sentences. Actually, complex sentence is technically one of the terms for how we classify sentences. So we don't expect you from the very beginning have a very kind of complete understanding those types of sentences. But nevertheless, it's important even before we understand them, we have a concept about them. So let's classify English sentences. So traditionally, grammarians classify all sentences into 2 types of structures. Those are traditional structures. So mathematically, it's actually easy to understand those 4 types, but we will take a look. So simple sentences. This is the first type. Well, we already saw a few of them, right? So what is a simple sentence? Well, a simple sentence essentially is just one so-called clause. Okay? So you can think about a clause is essentially one simple sentence. But sentences can consist of more than one clause. That's what we will discuss next. But at the very basic level, you think about a simple sentence is just one single clause. So they're kind of synonyms to each other. Simple sentence, clause. Okay. The definitive features of a simple sentence is that it contains one single independent clause. This is independent, very important term, independent, with no dependent clause. Well, this sounds like a kind of confusing definition, right? Because we have not even defined or talked about what is an independent clause and what is a dependent clause. But you will understand those terms shortly. But for now, just as a definition matter, a simple sentence is just one independent clause. That's it. No other clauses at all. Not even a second independent clause. Just one single independent clause. All right. So we saw this example. She's a beautiful girl. Right? This is a simple sentence because we only have one subject, she, and then we have one main verb, is, which is a be verb here. Okay. some students get logically confused when they say some sentences. They think there are two or more than one subjects, and then they think that, oh, by definition, one simple sentence should only have one subject. So when I see two subjects, then it's not a simple sentence. Well, a simple sentence can be simple despite just structurally. There are some compound structures, meaning that more than one combined together into a structure that looks like containing more than one such element, but because it's compound, so logically there's still only one unit. Okay, let's take a look at a simple example to understand what I mean by that. Aaron and Albert like video games and basketball. Okay, what type of sentence is this? This is, of course, still a simple sentence. Despite the fact that we have two persons here, Aaron and Albert, both being part of the subject, but this is a compound structure. So Aaron and Albert they're two persons because of this N. Aaron and Albert, this is a so-called compound structure. So a compound structure logically still is one unit. So therefore, the subject in this sentence is just Aaron and Albert. We will see later that a subject doesn't mean that you have only one word or one person or one thing. Logically, it can be a clause, for example, a noun clause, but we'll study that later. The takeaway here is that when we talk about the subject, it can be actually much more complicated than just say a single word. Okay? Similarly, here, of course, in the whole sentence, you can only find one verb that is like, which is an action verb. It's not a be verb or non-linking verb. It's an action verb. This is a transitive verb, like something. It needs an object. But here, the object is again a compound structure, the video games and basketball. So once again, those two are connected by this conjunction and it's a compound structure. But logically, this whole concept as a unit, something which consists of video games and basketball, is just one unit that is the object of this verb, like. So, despite the fact that we have some compound structure here, the whole sentence is logically very simple. One subject, an action verb, and the action verb has its object. That's it. The three parts. Despite the fact that we have many words in this sentence, relatively speaking, looks like we have two subjects and two objects, but logically one subject, one object. So this is absolutely a simple sentence. Okay, so once we have understood what a simple sentence is, then we can move on to the next one, which is a compound sentence. So what is a compound sentence? Well, a compound sentence contains two, or could be more, but it's very, very rare if you see three, because two is already kind of long, unless you have a parallel structure, which we'll talk about later. Typically, when you have a compound sentence, it's made of two independent clauses. Okay? Because those two clauses oh, I should not say two sentences. I'm sorry, I should say two independent clauses. That's exactly why we want to use another term, clause, because in this case, it's still one sentence. Overall, it's a compound sentence, but it's made of two independent clauses. What do we mean by that? They are peer to each other. The two are kind of just equal to each other in terms of their status. No one is less important than the other, so the two are kind of peers. Although the structures may look very kind of asymmetrical, but logically, the two clauses are independent of each other. And actually, we call them coordinate clauses because of this nature. Okay, the important thing about a compound sentence is that it does not have any dependent clause, and we will see what that means. So, let's take a look. The dog was hungry. Well, that's a complete sentence, right? If it stands alone all by itself, the dog was hungry. So that's a complete sentence. Because of that, in this sentence, it appears as an independent clause. Why it's independent? Because we see an and, which is a conjunction. So, and I was exhausted. So I was exhausted by itself. It could be a complete sentence if it just stands there alone, right? So here we have two otherwise complete and independent sentences. We connect them with this conjunction and. Okay? We will see how there are other conjunctions. By the way, they are called coordinate conjunctions. But the important thing here is that we use this particular structure. We use a comma and this and to connect the two independent clauses together into one sentence. And this is a compound sentence. It's very important to understand the two parts are logically equal to each other. No one is less or more important than the other, so we connect them with this particular structure, a comma plus a conjunction. There are other ways to connect the two independent clauses into a compound sentence. This looks very simple, but for whatever reason, it could be very confusing to a lot of students. Actually, if you take the SAT exam, there's a writing and the language section in the SAT exam. This particular structure or similar structures are tested heavily in the SAT. It's very important to understand this is a compound sentence. Okay, it could be using different conjunction. For example, I was exhausted, but the dog was excited. So here, almost the same, but we use a different conjunction to signal the contrast. So I was exhausted, but dog apparently not. It was excited. Okay, we will see more just conjunctions for building the compound sentence. All right. Oops. I guess I messed up with this the animation. So that's okay. So the next one we will study is complex sentence. Complex sentences are actually complex. Well, that's not surprising, right? But at the logical level, it's not that difficult to visualize what a complex sentence is. The definition is quite simple. A complex sentence contains a single independent clause. Look, we say a single independent clause with one or more dependent clauses. Now, that logically makes much better sense, right? You have one independent clause, which, by the way, we sometimes call the main clause. And then it has one or more dependent clauses. So apparently, the independent, dependent, so therefore dependent sounds less important, right? Because it depends on the independent clause. Or it depends on the main clause. That's what it is. So you have one single independent clause which is attached with one or more dependent clauses. Okay? So let's take a look at those examples. I will go to the gym after I finish my homework. What is the main idea here? Is the main idea finishing the homework or going to the gym? Well, in this particular sentence, going to the gym is the main idea. Actually, if you think about from information delivery perspective, the author of this sentence wants to emphasize going to the gym more than finishing the homework. So the main focus here is going to the gym, not finishing the homework. And this sentence is structured in a way that I finish my homework. That could be a complete sentence. It stands alone, right? But here it appears as a dependent clause. And it's attached to the main clause, I will go to the gym, which itself could also be a complete sentence if it stands alone, with an after. So what is this after? This is subordinate conjunction. Okay, unlike the and or but, also called coordinate conjunction. This after is a subordinate conjunction. And this is a adverb. Okay, so we will see that, learn all those concepts later. But from this point on, you just need to understand the overall picture, the concept. So what is an adverb? What is a coordinate conjunction? Those things are less important to you at this point. You don't have to worry too much about them, but just to understand that in this sentence, there's one main clause, one independent clause, that is, I will go to the gym. And it has a dependent clause, I finish my homework, that is attached to the main clause via this conjunction after. So this is the adverb clause, okay? So the conjunction after here introduced the dependent clause. But there are several different types of dependent clause, like adjective clause. Here is the adverb clause. But we haven't even talked about what is exactly an adjective or adverb. So not to worry about too much about what is an adjective clause or adverb clause. We'll learn all those later. Okay, the next example. She won the math competition because she has practiced so many hard problems. Okay, here once again, the main focus of the sentence is the point that she won the math competition. That's the main idea. And we provide a reason for this main clause because she has practiced so many hard problems. So if you look at she has practiced so many hard problems, that could be a complete sentence all by itself. And it appears in this overall sentence as a dependent clause. It depends on the main clause because it's attached to the main clause. Once again, where this because, okay? Because introduce this causal adverb clause because she has practiced so many hard problems. So this is a complex sentence, okay? The sentence could be really complicated when it has more than one dependent clause. In theory, it can go even more, 3 or 4, but those will be very rare. I haven't seen, I guess 3 probably is the most you can get. If a sentence, unless you have a parallel, once again, unless you have a parallel structure, it will be very bizarre if you have more than 2 dependent clauses. 3 sounds kind of too many. But in this example, this is quite typical. The candidates that run on the Republican platform argue that most people do not want to pay high taxes. What is the main clause here? Well, everybody, once you are in middle school, or if you are in high school, you need to be really good at spotting or identifying the main clause of a complex sentence. Okay? And that's why we will start studying sentence diagramming today. It's a very, very important skill. Once you are provided with a long and complex sentence, you can quickly identify where's the main part. Much just like a tree, you don't look at rows of branches or leaves, you want to look at the trunk. You look at the main thing of an otherwise complicated sentence. So where is the main clause? The main clause is that the candidates argued something. The subject of the main clause here is the candidate. And the verb for that main subject is argued. The candidate argued, because argued is a transitive verb. Here is a transitive verb. So it has an object. And what is that object? That object is that most people do not want to pay high taxes. Look, most people do not want to pay high taxes. This could be a complete sentence if it stands alone, right? Here is attached to the main clause through this that. This is a so-called noun-clause because you will learn later, because argue needs an object, and that's usually fulfilled by a noun. So this clause, most people do not want to pay high taxes, logically serves as a noun for the object needed by argue. And it's introduced by this that. What is this word that? Well, that here is what we call an expletive. Well, essentially means that it does not serve any grammatical function, logical function in this sentence. We will see what that means later. Okay, so that means that this clause that most people do not want to pay high tax is logically the object of the main action verb argued. Okay? How about the early part? That run on the Republican platform. That run on the Republican platform. This could be a complete sentence because it does have a subject which is that. Okay? Well, you may get a little bit confused. We just say that the second that is expletive, meaning that it does not have any grammatical role, but this that actually is the subject of this clause. That run on the Republican platform, because this is an adjective clause. It modifies the subject of the main clause, candidates. The candidates, what kind of candidates? Who are they? We define or modify the main subject candidates by provide additional information that run on the Republican platform. This provides actual additional information to the subject candidates. So therefore, logically, this serves as an adjective, modifying candidates. So this is a so-called adjective clause, also called relative clause, because here we have a relative pronoun that pointing to candidates. What is that here? That is just another term or name for candidates. By that, we really mean the candidates. Okay, so this is a complex sentence that has two independent clauses. But logically, the main clause is quite simple. The candidates argued something. That's the trunk of this tree. We cannot be too distracted by the branches. We need to focus on the top level main part of a sentence. Well, this will take a lot of work to get gradually comfortable about how to quickly identify the main part and the less important part. The main clause, the independent clause, and then the dependent clauses, and then all kinds of different dependent clauses, which we will study later. Okay, so the last one, so far we have introduced simple sentence, compound sentence, and complex sentence. The last one, we said there are 4 types, right? So the last one is just compound complex. Once you have understood what is a compound sentence and what is a complex sentence, then this one comes as no surprise. It's just a combination of the two. Okay, so the definition is that a compound complex sentence contains 2 independent clauses. That's the property of a compound sentence, right? But at the same time, it also contains at least 1 dependent clause. That's the property of a complex sentence. So a compound complex is just really a combination of the two. Okay? And usually this type of sentences are much less frequently used, but sometimes it does have an advantage over other type of sentence. So those are the tools you will have when you write. Understanding the nature of them will be important, but we will study them later. So let's take a look at this simple example. It was a beautiful evening that could be complete sentence, right? It was a beautiful evening. So after we left work, we went for a walk. Okay. What is the main idea here? Well, actually there's more than one. So it was a beautiful evening. We talk about the weather, the evening, whatever. The evening was beautiful. That's one thing we talk about in this sentence. But the other thing is that we went for a walk. Those two songs, there's a logical relationship, right? Because it was a beautiful evening, we went for a walk. That's what you would think. There's a causal relationship. But you're right. Logically, there is such a relationship, but the sentence is not built that way. How the sentence is constructed? We have a so here. So, in this case, is one of the 7 so-called coordinate conjunction, which those 7 can be convenient termed as fanboys. Okay, we'll study that later. This is a comma plus a conjunction, coordinate conjunction, just as we saw, comma and. So it connects 2 independent clauses. One is, it was a beautiful evening. The other complete or independent clause is, after we left work, we went for a walk. Look, if we separate this out, after we left work, we went for a walk. That could be a complete sentence as well. So if we just separate it out, after we left work, we went for a walk. What kind of sentence is that? It's a complex sentence. Because after we left work, we went for a walk, itself contains 2 clauses, right? After we left work, we went for a walk. And clearly, because of this after introduce a dependent clause, we left work. Then the main clause, we went for a walk. So this is a type of complex sentence we just saw earlier. Now, in this overall sentence, the 2 are connected via this conjunction, so, and the so is a coordinate conjunction. So this is a compound complex sentence. Why? It has 2 independent clauses. One is, it was a beautiful evening, and the other is, we went for a walk. And it contains 1 dependent clause, that is, we left work. It's attached to the second independent clause, we went for a walk, through this after conjunction. And then 1 simple independent clause, 1 complex sentence are connected through this comma so structure. Okay, so this is a compound complex sentence. So logically, once you know compound and complex, building a compound complex, it's very mechanical. Okay, you just have a coordinate conjunction. You need that. Or as we will see, we could use semicolon to do that, but that's a different story for another day. In general, when you connect 2 independent clauses together, use a coordinate conjunction with a comma to connect them. All right, all those things, comma, coordinate conjunction, actually are very important, and it will be tested heavily on many exams like the SAT or other standardized exams. So that's the four traditional structures. So logically, it's not that difficult. Simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. All right? Okay, so this compound complex, this is a summarization of what we just talked about. It differs from a complex sentence because it contains more than one independent clause. That's a feature of compound sentence. At the same time, it differs from a compound sentence because one of the independent clauses contains a dependent clause. It could be case that both contain a dependent clause, but then the sentence usually look too complicated. It will be very rare to see that, but technically it may happen. All right, one of the independent clause may have even more than one dependent clause. Again, long, complicated sentences are generally less favored unless you have really some special needs to write such sentences. Usually we want to avoid overly complicated sentences. Okay, so last time we talked about some very simple sentence patterns, and as it turned out, by simple we really actually mean the simple sentence we just talked about today. I want to apologize a little bit. I just found that last time in the sentence diagram, I made two minor mistakes because of the copy and paste problem I had. In the two bottom one, you see that this is last time those two bars between is and beautiful, is and girl. I believe in last lecture I used a vertical bar, but they should be this kind of backward diagonal vertical bar. Still vertical, but it's a diagonal. We will see that's actually significant. It was a major mistake on my part, but that was because I copy and paste and forgot to change them. But we will talk about the meaning of that today. So we have those. This is just a quick review of what we did last time. Now, it's very important to just learn how to analyze sentences, especially complex sentences. But before we go there, we can see that no matter how sentences, how complicated they are, the fundamental building block is the simple sentences, right? Clearly, those compound, complex, they're all based on simple sentences. So that's why we want to study simple sentences heavily. Once we understand that, we can move on to the compound. Compound is relatively simple. You just use coordinate conjunctions to connect two, otherwise simple independent clauses. Complex sentences could be really complex. But before we go there, we want to study simple sentences first. And even a simple sentence can logically contain a lot of so-called modifiers. So we want to have some tool to help us to analyze sentences. And sentence diagramming is a very powerful and excellent tool for us to analyze sentence structures. But unfortunately, the schools, most schools, I believe at least most public schools, I don't know the situation in private schools, but it seems that they have stopped teaching sentence diagramming, most of them, if not all of them, for a long, long time. This was started by everyone, say 60 or 70 years ago, but nowadays almost unheard of, which is sad. Okay. So we already actually see from the last slides, we saw some diagrams here, but how exactly does it work? So we will use two of the sentence examples. All right. She sang a sad song. Now we know this is simple sentence because it's just one clause, right? One subject, one verb. If you want to diagram this sentence, what do we want to do? Okay. Sentence diagramming is just a tool. It's not part of the grammar. It's just an invention. It's a tool to help us understand grammar and sentence structures. Okay? It's very powerful, but it's a human-created just tool. Okay? So, very mechanical. To do sentence diagramming, we'll first draw a vertical line, a long line, because it may have a lot of just words. We want to put those words around this main line. So there's a vertical bar. Look, the bar actually goes across the main line, horizontal main line. It just goes over, so it's not just stop at the intersection. It extends beyond that intersection point to the bottom. This is very important. This is the main bar that separates the subject and quote-unquote predicate. We mentioned this fancy term. You don't have to worry about that too much, but think about it. It's just mainly about a verb and something, right? Actually, everything other than subject is called the predicate, but we are more concerned with the verb. So this vertical bar really, as we said, separate the subject from the predicate. So you can immediately understand the subject will be on the left-hand side and the verb will be on the right-hand side and above the main line. That's very important. We want to put important information above the main line. We'll see how and what kind of information that will go under the main line. But for now, it's very important to understand the most important thing will go above the main line. Okay? So for this simple, well, quote-unquote simple sentence, how should we diagram it? We want to put things into 3 slots above the main line. Why? Because this sentence contains a transitive verb. A transitive verb needs an object. If this sentence is just she said, it can't be that, because sing is both an intransitive verb and a transitive verb. We'll see later. In that situation, we don't need this second bar. But the important thing about this second bar is that it's different from the first vertical bar because it just stops at the intersection with the main line. It does not go beyond that, right? The difference is here, little thin. So this is the vertical bar separate the subject and the verb. And this one, as we will see, this is just separate the verb, then the object. And in this case, actually, it's always the transitive verb that has this vertical bar. If it's a be verb or so-called linking verb, we'll see shortly, we will use a different way. Actually, you may already know what that is. I apologize earlier for the mistake. Could be a slant, backward slant, diagonal bar. But for this one, it's a vertical bar. So she is the subject, so we want to put she there. This is a subject on the left-hand side of this longer vertical bar, the first one. And then, not surprisingly, the verb sang will go into the next slot above the main line. And we said the object of this action verb, song, will go further after the second vertical bar. But if you really want to understand how sentence diagram work and why we are doing this in the first place, the goal is to quickly identify the more important information or words in the sentence. So not every word will serve the same purpose, right? So we saw 5 words. Is the article an important one? Well, not so much, right? There's a sad, but we know, you should know, if you are in grade 7, you should know sad is an adjective here, especially in this case. Sad is an adjective modifying song. So it's a modifier. It does not otherwise exist without its client, right? Its client's song. So sad modifies song. Is also kind of special adjective. A sad song, both and sad modify song. So they should not go above the high main line. We only want to put important information. So we only put a song into this third slot. And where do a and sad go? They both modify song. So therefore, we put them, first of all, beneath the main line. And because they modify song, we want them to kind of just connect to song immediately. So we put them on those 2 diagonal, backward diagonal lines beneath the main line, in particular beneath song, and we put both of them there. Is there any special relationship between and sad? Not much so, except that we generally just put them into the same order as they appear in the sentence, okay? But logically, it doesn't matter whether we put before sad or sad before but it would be very kind of strange if we put sad before, because that's not just a sequence appearing in the sentence. But logically, they are just both attached to song in this way, okay? So this is a very, very simple sentence. Simple, not in the simple sentence sense, simple. We are not using that. We really mean it's just simple. Okay, so that's how we diagram this simple sentence, okay? Let's take a look at the second example. She's a beautiful girl. Okay, again, 5 words, very simple. She is the subject for sure. And look, this is different from the first sentence because now we have a be verb. Why is be verb important? Because be verb is not action. She is a beautiful girl. Does she perform any action? She did not even do a thing. We just describe her as a beautiful girl. She may not even know we are talking on back of her. So she did not do anything. We are just describing what kind of person she is. So this is very special. It's not an action verb. Be verb is not an action verb. So we need a different mechanism to diagram this sentence to make the distinction. We are dealing with a be verb. And in this case, be verb generally needs to have 2 so-called complement. Well, she is a beautiful girl. We already saw from the first example, and beautiful should be both modifier of a girl. So essentially, the main thing of this sentence is just she is girl, right? If you understood the first sentence, you should see that in this case, and beautiful should be diagrammed similar to and sad to song. So how do we diagram she is girl? Well, like we said, because this is a be verb, the next word to the be verb is not the object, but it's a complement. Why we are using this term? Well, she is girl. What does girl mean here? Girl is a noun. In this case, girl is used to further describe what kind of person she, which is subject here, right? So girl is essentially describing the subject. Without this girl, this sentence would be incomplete because we just say she is. She's what? We don't know what they're talking about. She is. So even you have a subject and you have a verb, you don't have a complete sentence because the idea has not been completed yet. So she is girl. This girl completed our idea about her. So therefore, this is called subject complement or subjective complement. It's a complement, meaning finishing something to the subject. And we diagram this particular case with a backward diagonal bar, slant, whatever you call it. It's right here, separating is and the subjective complement girl, and we will see how that works later. But like we did in the first one, a beautiful girl, are diagrammed right beneath girl. Okay, so those are very simple example, but as an introductory matter, they're important. So for us to understand why we are doing sentence diagramming, it's more important than how to do sentence diagramming in the first place. Why we are using this tool? It will force us to get a very clear visualized picture about how a sentence is built. And this can help us to check whether a sentence is grammatically incorrect or correct. The point about sentence diagramming is that every word, but not including punctuation, because you will see that two different sentences could have the same sentence diagram because they have different punctuations, but sentence diagram cannot take care of punctuation. But other than that, it will have a complete explanation of every single word appearing in a sentence. Some very rarely, so some sentences are hard to diagram. Let's face it, not every sentence is amenable to this tool, but most of them can be fairly accurately diagrammed. And this is a wonderful tool for you to study grammar. It's so unfortunate that schools are not teaching it anymore, which is ridiculous in America, right? We're turning the clock back on a lot of fronts. All right, so to summarize, sentence diagramming is something really helping you to analyze could be very complex sentences, force you to put every word into a proper location in this diagram. Okay, the time is up. I actually have more materials to introduce. I'm supposed to study doing this, but I will spend maybe 2 minutes or 5 minutes to explain what I thought I should do today, but we'll leave it for the next week, which is okay. We have already covered a lot. By the way, this is supposed to be a 3-year program. I don't want to, and you should not be overwhelmed. You know, when you study grammar, if you have to just cram everything into your brain within a relatively short amount of time without any opportunity to learn the concept and use the concept and skills in your actual writing or reading, I don't think the effect will be good. Therefore, I think spend 3 kind of relaxed years to study grammar is the right approach. And grammar, especially writing, is a lifelong journey, a lifelong, never finished project. Everybody, even the best writers, can improve their writing, right? So it's a really long-term project. So even if you are in grade 11, 10, it's not too late. It's never too late. Truth be told, a lot of college graduates in this country, they don't know much grammar at all. It's just so bad. It's a dire situation in this country. So next time, we already learned that simple sentences are the most important one for you to understand. Because once you get there, you cannot understand compound or complex sentences without understanding simple sentences, right? So we will study this approach, and this is quite conventional in the old days at least, because schools today are not teaching grammar and not teaching grammar formally anymore. It looks like a kind of just new, but it's really old. We want to classify simple sentences into different patterns. The good news is that there are only a finite number, around 10. Different books, different grammarians may have different ways of classifying simple sentences into different patterns, but they're kind of similar. It's just a choice depending on the grammarians, whether some people classify the simple sentences into 10 patterns, 7 patterns, or even more. But in this course, we will go a little bit higher. We will essentially use 11 different patterns of just to describe, classify simple sentences. But before we do that next time, it's super important to keep this in mind. What is a sentence? This oversimplified diagram it's really about one clause, right? It cannot cover complex sentence or compound sentence so this is really about a concept about simple sentence. You really just have 2 parts for it. One is a subject, somebody or something. One is a verb. That's the distinction between verb and predicate. Predicate, I don't really like that at all, but predicate is everything other than the subject. So it could include the object of the verb and something objective, complement, more than that. But at a very high level, you just need to firmly have this concept. A sentence needs a subject and a verb. Either does or describe the subject as something in some way. Either you have action or you have a linking verb to talk about the subject itself, not the action or behavior of the subject. Okay, so keep this high-level concept in mind. I will see you next week. Bye.